They discovered her lying still on the kitchen tiles, eyes partially open, body chilled, the evening meal untouched. Little did anyone imagine that 6 days hence, she would awaken with a revelation capable of profoundly impacting anyone who heard it. Rebecca Anderson had always been the sort of person who maintained equilibrium. As a registered nurse for more than 2 decades in Pittsburgh, she possessed the ability to mend wounds, soothe agitated patients, and convey distressing news with composure. However, no amount of experience in the emergency room had equipped her for the profound quietude that enveloped her existence following the accident. It was a rain-lashed Tuesday evening when law enforcement arrived at her doorstep. Her 9-year-old son, Daniel, had been struck by a driver under the influence of alcohol. He passed away instantaneously. 3 months later, her husband departed, packing his belongings and stating he could no longer endure the sorrow. He left without a farewell. The dwelling that once resonated with bedtime tales and piano instruction transformed into a silent repository of cherished moments. Rebecca did not weep, not anymore. She rose each morning, dressed as she always had, and attended church on Sundays. Yet her supplications felt perfunctory, akin to flipping a switch that failed to illuminate anything. She would gaze at the crucifix positioned above the altar, pondering if the divine presence had abandoned her. To her neighbors, she appeared reserved, courteous, and perpetually solitary. They referred to her as the nurse with the sorrowful gaze. But they remained unaware that she sometimes sat in darkness for extended periods, not even blinking. They did not know she slept with the lights on, as the nighttime quiet was unendurable. They were oblivious to the fact that the sole sound she truly perceived was the rhythm of her own heart. Even that felt like a burden. On the very evening it occurred, the day unfolded with its usual ordinariness. She had dedicated the day to sorting through old clothing for donation, folding them meticulously as if attempting to tuck away the past. The meal was simple: rice and leftover chicken. She set the plate but did not partake. The ceiling fan whirred with unusual intensity. The television remained dormant. The radio was gathering dust. Then, midway through washing the dishes, she clutched her chest. A sharp, constricting pain radiated through her rib cage, akin to fire contained beneath glass. The sponge slipped from her grasp. The faucet continued to run. Her legs gave way. Her head made a sickening thud against the linoleum, and for a few moments she ceased to be. Gloria, the elderly resident from the apartment above, heard the fall. She possessed a spare key, which Rebecca had entrusted to her months prior for emergencies. Gloria hurried inside and discovered Rebecca unconscious on the floor, her complexion alarmingly pale. Paramedics confirmed her heart had stopped. They worked diligently for nearly 6 minutes to revive her. They succeeded, but she did not awaken. For the ensuing 6 days, Rebecca remained in a comatose state at Mercy General Hospital, tethered to an array of monitors, tubes, and beeping machinery. Physicians reported her condition as stable but unresponsive. Family members journeyed from distant states. Clergy members offered prayers at her bedside. Friends lit candles, posted well wishes on Facebook, and whispered words of comfort into the sterile air of the intensive care unit. To all external observers, she appeared to be merely sleeping, but Rebecca was not. Something profound was transpiring. Beyond the purview of medical instruments, beyond neurological activity, beyond the realm of pharmaceuticals, somewhere distant from the sterile fluorescence and the life-sustaining machines, her spirit was being summoned to a place few have witnessed, and even fewer have returned from with a narrative. It is said that when the body rests, the soul recollects. For Rebecca Anderson, those 6 days in a coma were not blank pages. They constituted a journey charted in light, profound silence, and an essence far more ancient than any memory. It commenced in a locale that felt simultaneously nowhere and intimately familiar. Without walls, without a ceiling, only boundless space, warm and eternal, a meadow shimmering with soft verdance and golden hues. as if the very grass was breathing and the atmosphere was alive. There was an absence of pain, of time, of questioning, only the palpable sense that something sacred had just begun. She was not walking in the conventional sense, yet she was in motion, as light as the breeze, guided not by volition, but by an overwhelming sense of peace. And then she perceived her. Not a winged figure, not a sculpted image, not even a fleeting apparition, but a woman draped in azure, emanating serenity and immense power. Her presence did not demand notice. It invited it, eliciting a response that compelled the knees to buckle, not from apprehension, but from deep veneration. Her eyes were like vast oceans. Her voice was a whisper, yet it carried the resonance of countless supplications. "Rebecca," she articulated, as a mother might call her child home after weathering a protracted tempest. "You are positioned between realms, no longer living, yet not entirely departed. However, there is something you must witness, something the world is compelled to comprehend." Rebecca remained speechless, incapable of utterance. Emotion coiled around her chest like tenacious ivy. Certain truths are so profound that the soul prostrates itself before them long before the physical form follows suit. And so she knelt. The woman placed a hand upon her shoulder, and the universe subtly shifted. The verdant expanse began to resonate, not with audible sound, but with palpable presence. The firmament deepened in its coloration. The blades of grass seemed to fold as if in deference to something sacred. A pathway materialized, not constructed from stone, but woven from pure sound. It pulsed rhythmically, like the very act of breathing, casting a gentle luminescence beneath their feet. "I am Mary," the woman declared, "Mother of Heaven. I have been drawn here because the Father perceived your profound silence." She paused, then added, "And because the world is currently resonating with melodies that deeply afflict his heart." Rebecca looked upward, bewildered. "Melodies?" "Not with vocal cords," Mary responded. "With hearts, with thoughts, with profound emotional wounds that defy articulation." Then arrived the moment that irrevocably altered everything. Mary softly whispered, "You too have sung these melodies." The words pierced through Rebecca with the intensity of light penetrating stained glass. For deep within her heart, Rebecca understood that in her period of grief, in her wavering convictions, in her solitary prayers that ultimately dissolved into silence, she herself had contributed to these sorrowful strains that pained the celestial realm. The expansive field surrounding them began to transform. Blossoms receded, the wind ceased its movement, and the light diminished. Before them stretched a thoroughfare constructed from pure light and an unruffled stillness, a path intended for Rebecca's traversal. "There are 6, Mary stated. 6 hymns that the world silently intones, 6 that resonate with greater power than any choir, 6 that the heavens acknowledge and lament." Rebecca stepped forward, trembling not from fear, but from an overwhelming sense of awe. "Why me?" she inquired. "Because," Mary replied, "you have persevered, and now you must bear witness." And with those words, they embarked on their initial journey together into a silence that eloquently communicates and a truth that attentively listens. The first locale they encountered was not a sanctuary or a judicial chamber, nor even an open field. It was a secluded clearing, serene, tinged with gray, and imbued with a chill. This was not the sort of cold that prickles the skin, but rather a sensation that permeates the very marrow. An oppressive silence permeated the atmosphere, dense as the fog preceding a tempest. Rebecca surveyed her surroundings, noting a peculiar absence. No bird song, no rustling wind, not even the sound of her own exhalation. Then, a low, hollow whisper began, like a voice trapped within a well. "It no longer matters. No one would even notice if I vanished. What is the purpose of striving?" The voice did not originate from a single source. Rather, it was a composite of many, layered and ascending, crashing like invisible waves. As the echoes intensified, figures began to materialize. They were not fully formed, merely ethereal outlines. Men, women, even children were depicted in various states, kneeling, seated, or curled inward, each silently humming the same lament without moving their lips. "My existence is devoid of meaning." Mary stood beside Rebecca, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "This is the most pervasive melody on earth today," she remarked softly. "It is sung not with musical notes, but with profound despair." And then Rebecca beheld herself in the distant periphery of the clearing, her hair disheveled, her gaze vacant, her hands pressed into the earth. It was her, not the individual standing beside Mary at that moment, but the version of herself who had returned home from the hospital that fateful night and abandoned all belief in anything. She bore the countenance of someone who breathed but did not truly live. That Rebecca whispered, "Why should I face tomorrow? Who would even care if I didn't? My child is gone. My heart departed with him." It was a facet of herself she had either forgotten or deliberately tried to suppress, but confronting it now, the sheer weight of those words returned with the force of gravity. She sank to her knees. Mary knelt beside her, gently placing a warm hand over Rebecca's. "This lament wounds the heavens more than you can possibly conceive," Mary conveyed, "because it is articulated by those who still draw breath, yet believe they have already ceased to be." Rebecca closed her eyes. Tears traced paths down her cheeks, not born of sorrow, but from a sudden, profound understanding. She had lived this song. She had sung it in the depths of her silence. And now, for the very first time, she heard it from an external perspective, and it shattered her entirely. "Is it truly so?" Rebecca whispered, "that my life still held significance, even then?" Mary offered a gentle smile, her eyes alight with illumination. "Even in the quietude, even in the suffering, even when no one else observes, God perceives. And in response, He never ceased to vocalize your name." At that precise instant, the ethereal Rebecca in the clearing, the one kneeling in utter desolation, became enveloped by a soft, luminous glow. It embraced her like a comforting blanket. She raised her head for the first time and managed to smile, a fragile yet genuine expression. And then she dissolved into the light. Rebecca rose to her feet, transformed, lighter, her perspective clearer. Mary regarded her and spoke. "Convey their message. Inform the world that even when all seems lost, life retains its value. For the worth of existence has never been contingent upon comfort or clarity. It has invariably been predicated upon love." With that pronouncement, the initial hymn faded. The clearing dissolved into luminescence, and the onward path pulsed once more, softly beckoning them toward the second melody. The clearing receded, replaced by a peculiar edifice, not constructed from stone or marble, but from light and the very essence of breath. It lacked walls, seating arrangements, or an altar. Only a column of golden vapor ascended into the heavens, encircled by thousands of whispering voices. Each utterance was soft, yet carried the gravitas of thunder. Rebecca drew nearer. Some voices expressed profound longing. Others were hollow, yet all shared an identical cadence. It was the melody of doubt, artfully disguised as fervent prayer. "Lord, are you present? Why do you remain silent? I implore you ceaselessly, yet nothing changes." Mary's voice gently interrupted the stillness. "This," she explained, "is the second forbidden hymn, not because the divine is offended by it, but because this is the song that strains the bond between father and child." Rebecca listened intently, and then she recognized her own voice within the chorus, distinct and trembling, emanating from a different existence. "Please, bring my son back. Just once, I beg you. If you truly hear me, why are you so silent?" It was the voice of a mother praying in solitude within a darkened apartment. It was the voice of a believer whose faith had begun to falter, not from anger, but from a perceived absence. She recollected night after night, whispering into her pillow, her sheets soaked with tears, pleading with God for a miracle he never granted. Eventually, she ceased her prayers, not due to a lack of desire to believe, but because she could no longer bear another night of receiving no response. Mary placed a hand upon her arm. "Prayer becomes a one-sided discourse," she stated, "when sorrow outweighs faith. However, the heavens are never deaf. They simply communicate in a timing and a language that the soul must learn to discern." And then, in the heart of the temple, the mist shimmered and visions emerged, akin to memories caught in mid-exhalation. Rebecca witnessed a woman weeping in her kitchen, a rosary clutched in trembling hands, a man praying in silence within his vehicle before entering a job interview, a young boy whispering prayers beside his ailing mother's hospital bed. And in each scenario, subtly, quietly, the response from above was evident. Not through celestial pronouncements, not through overt miracles, but through a nurse who extended her hours, a stranger's comforting embrace during a casual encounter in a grocery aisle, a physician who identified a critical issue just in the nick of time. "You see," Mary explained gently, "the Father heard every word, but his response was not intended to impress the world. It was meant to sustain the heart." Rebecca's chest constricted. She recalled once more how, even during her most desolate nights, she had always found the fortitude to rise the following day. How she always had sustenance, despite financial constraints. How Gloria, from upstairs, had arrived with a comforting soup on the solitary evening when she had contemplated ending her life. "That was him," she whispered. "I simply failed to recognize the reply." Mary nodded. Faith is not tested by silence. It is tested by what you choose to place your trust in during that silence. Then, Mary turned toward the swirling prayers that still hung in the air. "When you return," she advised, "teach others not to cease speaking, even when they believe no one is listening, for every prayer, even the fragmented ones, plants seeds in the celestial realm, and one day they will blossom." The golden mist began to dissipate. The temple faded like morning mist, and Rebecca, standing taller now, wiped a single tear from her cheek. "I will never again claim he is silent," she vowed softly. "Good," Mary smiled. "Now, a third hymn awaits." And once again, the illuminated pathway unfurled before them. The subsequent setting was more challenging to articulate. It bore no resemblance to a field or a sanctuary. It resembled a reflection, an expansive void devoid of walls or sky. Merely a mirror extending in every direction, reflecting not visages, but the very thoughts themselves. Each reflection shimmered with a distinct declaration, whispers etched into pure light. "I should never have been born. I invariably ruin everything. God must have made an error in creating me." These were not cries of defiance, but rather profound wounds masquerading as incontrovertible truths. Rebecca's breath hitched in her throat. She sensed it before she visually registered it. A deep internal pressure in her chest, reminiscent of a memory surfacing from an unfathomably distant buried past. Mary turned to her, her gaze solemn. "This is the third hymn," she stated. "The most self-inflicted of all, sung not with anger, but with profound shame. It fractures the heart of heaven because it denies the very essence of your existence." The mirrored surface surrounding them began to reveal individuals, young, old, of every hue and background, yet all possessing the same internal resonance. "I am not adequate. Everyone would be better off without me." Some were huddled in corners, others presented a cheerful exterior, but their eyes held a vacant stare when observed. And then, in one secluded section of this mirrored world, a small child materialized. A young girl, no older than 8, sat with her knees drawn to her chest, trembling quietly. Her dark hair cascaded over her face, but Rebecca recognized her immediately. "That's me," she whispered. Mary knelt beside the child, gently brushing the hair away from her eyes. And in those eyes, so small, so filled with apprehension, lay the wound that had never healed. "She remembers," Mary explained, "the day someone told her she was an unintended consequence." Rebecca's body shuddered. She now recalled the heated exchange in the kitchen, her mother's outburst of words she never intended, but words that remained indelibly etched. "You were never planned. You have disrupted my life." They were not meant to be permanent pronouncements, but the child within her had inscribed them as eternal truths. Mary looked back at Rebecca, her voice gentle yet firm. "This hymn is perilous because many sing it even while attending religious services. They serve, they pray, they cherish others, yet they never truly believe they were deserving of love themselves." The young girl slowly stood, unsteady, still trembling, still uncertain. Mary extended her hand, and as the girl grasped it, a radiant light pulsed from her palm, not blinding, but warm, akin to sunlight filtering through a pane of colored glass. The little girl smiled, not because she had been magically healed, but because she had been truly seen. "Inform them," Mary instructed, "that no child of God is an error. Not those born into fractured unions, not those who have been abandoned or rejected, not even those who feel utterly invisible." Rebecca wiped away her tears. The mirror surrounding them began to dissolve, much like ice melting under the morning sun. The voices faded, the oppressive pressure lifted, and she experienced a sensation she hadn't felt since her childhood. Acceptance. "I have carried that falsehood my entire life," she articulated. "But it was never true, was it?" Mary smiled. "No. You were conceived before the very foundations of the earth were laid. You are not a mistake. You are a masterpiece, misunderstood by humanity, but never by the divine." Rebecca drew a deep, cleansing breath. For the first time in years, it felt as though it held profound significance. Mary placed a hand over Rebecca's heart. "Are you prepared?" she inquired. "There is another hymn awaiting." Rebecca nodded, and together they stepped forward into the next sorrow that the world continues to express. The pathway narrowed, the light dimmed, and abruptly they found themselves standing in a broad valley, not desolate but burdened. It was a field of stones, each one standing tall like a tombstone, inscribed not with names but with memories. Each stone pulsed with phrases, "I forgive, but I will not forget." "God understands why I harbor resentment." "They do not warrant absolution." Rebecca reached out to touch one of the stones and recoiled. It radiated a chilling cold, not of frost, but of pain that had never been released. Mary moved to her side, remaining silent for a moment. "This is the fourth hymn," she stated, "sung by those who have been wounded and refuse to open their hearts." All around them, figures were seated beside the stones. Some were engaged in prayer, others were weeping, and some were simply gazing, their lips moving, their hearts securely locked away. And then Rebecca saw herself, kneeling before a stone larger than the rest, her hair neatly tied back, a rosary in hand, her lips murmuring the names of her children, her neighbors, her patients. But one name remained unspoken. She recognized the stone. She recognized the countenance behind it. It belonged to the woman her husband had abandoned her for. "I prayed for everyone," Rebecca whispered, "except her." The memory surged back with the force of thunder. The betrayal, the humiliation, the suppressed rage. She had never uttered a curse against the woman, but neither had she ever offered a blessing. And in that profound silence, she had erected a formidable prison around her own heart. Mary knelt beside the stone and gently placed her fingers upon its surface. An image materialized. A pew in a church, a woman praying with intense fervor, but her supplications echoed back, vacant and hollow. "Forgiveness is not about forgetting," Mary explained. "It is about severing the connection between you and the individual who inflicted harm. When we withhold it, we create an emptiness in our own prayers. Rebecca sank to her knees. But how can I forgive someone who never sought it, who never offered an apology? Mary looked at her, her gaze unwavering. Forgiveness is not for their benefit. It is for yours, so that you may once again breathe freely, so that you can cease carrying their shadow into each new day. The stone began to tremble, fine cracks appearing, not to shatter it, but to pry it open like a door that had been sealed for far too long. Rebecca placed her hand over the name she had kept buried in silence for years. God, she whispered, I do not know how to love her, but I no longer wish to harbor hatred. The valley subtly shifted. The atmosphere grew lighter. A gentle breeze stirred the field for the first time, and above them a new melody resonated, not one of anger, but of profound release. Mary rose and extended her hand. To forgive is not to pretend the pain never occurred, she remarked. It is to consciously choose to cease reliving it. It is to inform your heart that you are permitted to move forward. Rebecca took her hand. The stone behind her gradually dimmed, not erased, but fundamentally transformed. I never realized that unforgiveness could reside within a prayer, Rebecca remarked. Mary nodded. It finds the most discreet hiding places in sacred spaces. They proceeded forward once more, the valley fading into mist behind them. And ahead, a desert lay in wait, parched, fissured, and infused with an aura of anger. Mary looked out and stated, The subsequent hymn does not weep, it makes demands. The mist dissipated, revealing not a sanctuary, nor a garden, nor a valley, but a desert, dry, cracked, and devoid of color. There were no indications of life, only wind, dust, and people. So many people. They were not walking, but crawling. Some were on their hands and knees, while others sat in quiet contemplation, their fists clenched, their gazes fixed upon the heavens. Their lips remained sealed, but their hearts screamed. God took everything from me. If he is benevolent, why did this transpire? Why do the wicked prosper while the devout suffer? Mary's voice, when it finally came, was low and tinged with grief. This is the fifth hymn, the one that neither whispers nor questions. It accuses. Rebecca stepped cautiously into the sand. It crunched beneath her feet, as dry as bone. The air felt heavy, not with heat, but with a palpable bitterness. She surveyed her surroundings and recognized faces that were familiar to her. A father who had lost both his sons in a devastating fire. A nurse who had witnessed her patient succumb to a medication error she had not caused. A child bearing visible bruises, praying beneath a broken cross. Each of them challenging the heavens for an explanation. And then, there she was again. Another iteration of Rebecca, lying supine in the sand, her eyes wide open, silent, but her soul was emitting a silent scream. I served you. I placed my trust in you. I prayed every night, and you allowed my son to die. You watched. You remained silent. How is that equitable? Mary walked towards her and knelt in the dust. The anguish underpinning this hymn, she explained, is not born of rebellion. It is the profound ache of a broken heart. However, when pain is fueled by pride, it transforms into a potent poison. Rebecca fell to her knees beside her own reflected image. She recalled that particular night. That night, she cried into her pillow, her hands tearing at the sheets, questioning why a drunk driver was spared while her son was taken. The following morning, she attended church, but her heart remained absent. Mary gently placed a hand on Rebecca's shoulder, assuring her that heaven was not oblivious to injustice. However, she explained, heavenly justice differed from earthly measures. It wasn't balanced on scales, but weighed against eternity. Rebecca's voice quivered as she asked, "Why does love demand such a high price?" Mary rose and pointed to the distant desert's edge, where a faint, clear stream trickled through the arid landscape. Some, Mary explained, never reach that point. They remain stagnant in their anger, but those who persevere discover water. They learn that suffering, offered with love, can redeem more than it devastates. Rebecca gazed at the horizon, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. Is that where hope resides? Mary smiled, affirming, indeed, even the most barren ground can flourish anew. Suddenly, the figure of Rebecca lying in the sand began to stir, not with sudden strength, but with a nascent willingness. She turned her gaze towards the stream, and her clenched fists finally relaxed. Rebecca stood. The sky above began to lighten, and the very air seemed to shift. I accused God of unfairness, she whispered. But it wasn't justice I truly needed. It was healing. Mary nodded, stating that healing never starts with answers, but with surrender. The desert dissolved, the wind softened, and before them lay a path darker than any before. Mary turned to her, her voice now a gentle murmur. One final hymn remains, the most perilous of all. Rebecca took a breath and stepped forward. The light vanished, leaving only a profound, heavy darkness, not of the night, but of the soul. It wasn't a silent void, but an echoing emptiness. Mary's voice broke through the stillness. This is the final hymn, the most dangerous. Rebecca struggled to move as the shadows around her coalesced into hollow figures, slumped against unseen barriers, their eyes vacant, mouths closed, their surrender absolute, devoid of grace. They had relinquished hope, believing the light would never return. It would be better if I simply vanished, one figure whispered. God will not forgive me. I was born to suffer. There is no point in trying any longer. Mary's voice trembled with compassion. This hymn does not cry out. It simply lets go of hope. Rebecca's breath hitched as she recognized one of the figures in the deepest shadow as herself, not a memory, but a potential future. But she saw herself in a darkened room, curtains drawn, phone silenced, utterly numb. That night, when the electricity had been cut, when she hadn't eaten for a day, when no calls came, she had laid down with the thought, if I don't wake up tomorrow, it would be easier. Trembling, Rebecca moved closer. The figure remained unresponsive. Mary placed a comforting hand on Rebecca's back. So many sing this hymn in silence, she murmured, not with defiance, but with resignation. Rebecca knelt beside her shadow self and reached out. Though the darkness resisted, cold and heavy, she pressed on, embracing the figure. You are loved, she whispered. The figure stirred, like a dying ember rekindling its glow. Mary stepped forward, pointing to something behind them, a single, tiny, flickering candle, still alive. Do you see that? Mary asked. That candle is why she survived. Someone, somewhere, prayed. A grandmother, a stranger, a child. Their prayer became that flame. Rebecca watched as the flame intensified, and the figure in her arms began to weep, not in despair, but as one finally recognizing home. Mary knelt beside them. No soul is ever truly alone, she affirmed. Even in the deepest abyss, love waits for a single plea, a flicker of help me, and heaven rushes in. The darkness began to fracture, not like shattered glass, but like the slow fading of a battlefield's grief. The candle transformed into a beam, the beam into the sky, and Rebecca found herself standing again, bathed in light, the air crisp, the ground yielding. She turned to Mary, tears streaming, but her shoulders no longer burdened. So many souls remain trapped down there, she said. Mary nodded. And that is why you must return. You have heard the 6 hymns of sorrow. Now it is time to sing the hymns of life. Rebecca stood taller, the ache in her chest replaced by warmth, the emptiness by purpose. Mary presented 2 gifts, a rosary radiating light and a small candle gently placed over Rebecca's heart. This shall be your shield, Mary declared, and this your flame. The surrounding world shimmered. Rebecca looked at the light within her, finally understanding. She had traversed hell, but she was not bound to remain there. The darkness receded, replaced by a soft, gentle light, like the dawn breaking not in the sky but within her soul. Rebecca stood still, the candle in her chest glowing with a steady, living warmth, mirroring her own renewed spirit. A profound peace settled, silencing all voices and memories. They were back in the garden, the same one from the beginning, but now Rebecca perceived its beauty with newfound clarity. Dewdrops sparkled like starlight on the grass, the wind whispered with promise, and the trees swayed as if exhaling relief. Everything, or perhaps she herself, had transformed. Mary stood beside her, a tender smile gracing her lips. Rebecca gazed at her hands, once trembling with grief, now imbued with purpose. "I believed I was brought here for judgment," she whispered, "but I found only love." Mary nodded slowly. "You have navigated every falsehood that sought to define you, every shadow that attempted to silence you, and you still stand." Rebecca corrected her. "I am not merely standing. I am awakened." The realization struck her with the force of a sudden gust of wind. She hadn't been rescued from death, but reborn into life, a new existence, unburdened by pain, where even her scars radiated light. "I carried so many false songs," she murmured, tears gently falling. "Songs of shame, anger, and bitterness. I didn't even realize I was singing them." Mary drew closer, her hand resting softly on Rebecca's heart. "Heaven grieves for those hymns," she explained, "not because they offend God, but because they persuade his children to live as if unloved." The wind swirled around them like a comforting embrace, the grass danced, and the flowers bloomed, the entire garden seeming to exhale with her. Rebecca lifted her face to the sky, her eyes, chest, and soul open, feeling whole for the first time in what felt like an eternity. This wholeness wasn't born of answered questions or erased pain, but from finally recognizing her wounds as portals through which light had entered. Mary smiled. "Now you understand," she said. "The world doesn't need perfect individuals. It needs those who have been healed." Rebecca surveyed the garden, pulsing with possibility. She was no longer the broken woman on the floor, nor the child who believed herself a mistake, nor the mother who screamed into her pillow. She was a witness, and the candle within her still burned brightly. "What happens next?" she inquired. Mary's gaze drifted forward, towards a horizon shimmering like distant gold. "Now comes the purpose for which you were returned." The air shifted, not with wind, but with a palpable weight, as if heaven itself leaned in to listen. Rebecca stood beside Mary, the garden behind them, and before them a luminous veil, thin as mist yet pulsating with power. Beyond it lay something unnameable, yet undeniably home. Not the garden, nor the hospital, but the place where her true life awaited. Mary turned to her, her voice a soft echo. "You have navigated 6 hymns of sorrow," she said, "and now you must carry something back that the world has forgotten. The sound of hope." Rebecca's heart beat a slow rhythm. "But who will listen to me?" she asked. "I am no one, a woman who broke, doubted, and received only silence when I begged for answers." Mary smiled gently, a fire igniting in her eyes. "Precisely. That is why they will listen. Only those who have sat in darkness can speak of light without blinding others." Mary extended her hands. In one, a rosary pulsed softly, each bead like a heartbeat. In the other, a small candle, still aflame within its crystal shell. "This," Mary said, placing the rosary into Rebecca's palm, "is your shield against fear, doubt, and forgetfulness. And this," she continued, gently pressing the candle back into Rebecca's chest, "is your flame. It will not extinguish, even when grief returns, even when the world forgets what you have witnessed. This will remind you, you were there." Rebecca's eyes welled again, this time not with pain, but with purpose. "What do I do with it?" she asked. Mary moved closer, placing both hands on Rebecca's shoulders. "You carry it into waiting rooms and grocery lines, into conversations with strangers and sleepless nights, into places where others have lost their fire. You will not preach, you will not convert. You will be a witness, a light, a woman who faced death and returned with a whisper that saves." The garden around them began to recede. The sky brightened, the veil of light grew thinner, and Mary spoke one final time. "When the world around you sings the old hymns again, the songs of surrender, of doubt, of bitterness, do not counter them with noise. Answer them with your life." Rebecca reached out and clasped Mary's hand. "Will I remember this?" she asked. Mary smiled softly. "Not all of it, but enough." The light within Rebecca dimmed, the veil before her parted, and just as the garden vanished entirely, Mary's voice echoed like an eternal lullaby. "Now go, daughter. Sing the songs that heal. And remember, no one who sings with love ever sings alone." The light folded inward, like the closing of a sacred text, and Rebecca returned. Not with a dramatic fanfare, but with a simple blink. The harsh glare of hospital ceiling lights replaced the gentle radiance of heaven, the rhythmic beeping of machines, the sterile scent of antiseptic, and the chill of starched sheets against her skin. She gasped once, and her sister, slumped beside her bed, jolted awake, eyes wide, voice cracking. "She's awake! Oh my God, she's awake!" Nurses rushed in. Alarms sounded not in alarm, but in astonishment. A doctor, dropping his clipboard, stared at Rebecca as if witnessing the inexplicable. 6 days in a coma," he murmured. "Her vitals have never stabilized like this. This is a miracle." Rebecca remained silent at first, for she was not merely waking from sleep, but from eternity. She looked down at her hands. The same skin, the same fingers, yet imbued with a new sensation, as if belonging to someone who had died and been reborn. She attempted to sit up, weak but steady, and when asked if she remembered anything, she simply replied, "Enough." In the days that followed, word of her recovery spread. Doctors attributed it to the unexplainable, her family to answered prayers. Rebecca, however, recognized it as grace. She didn't immediately share the full extent of her experience. Some truths were too sacred for premature revelation. Yet, she carried it within her, in the measured cadence of her speech, as if each word bore significant weight. In her ability to meet anyone's gaze, even those consumed by anger, bitterness, or despair. And in her profound capacity to truly listen when someone confessed, "I don't know if I can keep going." For now, she possessed the answer. "I have been there. I have seen what lies beyond despair. And I have returned to tell you, it is not the end." Each night, Rebecca would hold a rosary, its glow unseen by others, and beside her bed, a single candle flickered, a constant, small flame, a tangible reminder, not a mere habit or symbol. It was a flame from another realm, still alive in this one. Rebecca never sought fame, wrote no books, founded no ministry, and granted no interviews. She simply lived, but transformed. Those who hadn't seen her in a while noticed the subtle shifts, the quiet presence she brought into a room, the attentive way she listened as if your story held paramount importance, the knowing smile that suggested a beautiful future yet to unfold for you. She returned to work at the clinic part-time, offering comfort by bringing soup to isolated patients, holding the hands of mothers undergoing chemotherapy, and sitting in silent solidarity with those who professed disbelief in prayer, yet somehow felt lighter in her presence. She never imposed her story, but when someone confessed, "I feel like I'm disappearing. I've prayed, and nothing has changed," she would meet their eyes with that steady, calm fire now residing within hers and whisper, "You are not alone. Even if you cannot feel it, you are being held. A candle is burning for you right now." Sometimes that was enough. Sometimes it was a lifeline. Rebecca became the person who remembered names, who arrived unasked, who forgave without expecting an apology, who sat with the suffering not to fix them, but simply so they wouldn't endure their pain in solitude. She was not a preacher, but a witness to mercy, silence, survival, and an inextinguishable light. Every night, before retiring, she would touch the candle on her nightstand, replacing it weekly but always keeping it lit, whispering, "For the next one, whoever they are, wherever they are, let them feel you." Rebecca understood that somewhere out there, another soul was singing one of those 6 silent hymns, and perhaps her flame could guide them home. There are songs we sing without melody, rising from wounds, silence, and unspoken words. They resonate with the silent declarations. I am unworthy. God has forgotten me. No one sees me. I am weary of striving. These hymns are sung in hospital rooms, in solitary dwellings, and in pews where smiles mask inner screams. Rebecca understands, for she once sang them too. But now, she sings a different tune. Not a perfect or sorrow-free melody, but a new kind of hymn, one that arises in defiance of ache. It is the hymn of persistence. I am still here. I am loved, even if I forget. My life holds meaning, even on quiet days. God hears, even in silence. Light still finds its way in. And perhaps, if you are reading this, you have been singing the old hymns for too long. Maybe you carry a burden of shame that was never yours, or you await a miracle in an empty space. Perhaps you are one prayer away from surrender. But Rebecca returned for you. Her story is not merely about a woman who faced death, but about a woman who finally embraced life, and now it is about you. What song are you singing? If it is sorrow, heaven hears you. If it is silence, heaven still embraces you, but perhaps it is time to change the tune. Even if it begins as a whisper, even if you don't yet believe it, try singing, I am still breathing. This means I am still becoming. This means there is still light. This means I am not alone. And when you do, someone else will hear your hymn and recall their own. Somewhere, someone sits in darkness, singing a song they never intended to write, perhaps lamenting, I am tired, I don't matter, God must be absent. But you have heard a different melody. And perhaps hearing Rebecca's story was meant to equip you to become a beacon in someone else's night. Before you move on, before this moment fades into recollection, perform one small act. Ignite something. It need not be a literal flame. Perhaps a comment, a prayer, a message to someone on your mind, or simply typing the words, I will carry the light. For when one person sings with hope, others begin to recall the melody. And perhaps, in this way, the world transforms, one quiet hymn at a time. If this narrative resonated with you, share it with someone still immersed in their song. Leave a comment, speak their name, light a candle, and remember, no one who sings with love ever sings alone. Until we meet again in another story, be the light.